get these organizations to understand that you need all three, because everybody starts with strength and conditioning. They see human performance as strength and conditioning. But if your nutrition's not good, your sleep's not good, your mental health isn't good, it doesn't matter how good the program is.
Anyways, back on track.
Back on track.
We're here with Casey. Casey, where are you from?
Corsicana.
Are you really? Yeah. Oh, man. I'm from Terrell.
Oh.
Did we connect on that previously?
No, we did not.
So what year did you graduate high school?
03?
03. Okay, I'm a little bit older than you, but, we were in the same district.
Dang.
Yeah.
Rivals?
Well, maybe.
Did y'all play each other in marching band?
No.
Okay.
Anyway, so the context of how Casey's arrived at our doorstep is that I had, and you may not even know this, found the fellas from Building the Elite, and heard you on a podcast. It's like, man, it's a really sharp person. You had some really great thoughts, and I just went on with my life. And then when we started doing the podcast, we found that there was a connection through Chelsea, and you reached out, and we've been able to connect on a number of different things that surround strength conditioning, some of the similarities that you've faced having to program design and customize and even individualize for how many people?
80 to 100.
80 to 100. So, similar conundrum that we find ourselves in. And then just some of the factors outside of reps and sets that seem to go into the long-term development for the tactical athlete, and lots of different conversations. So when I heard that she was coming to town, I was like, man, if there's any way that we could talk shop, that would be cool. So here we are.
How lucky for us.
Yes.
Where is home base right now?
San Diego.
So you're visiting Chelsea, or you came here for the podcast?
I came here for the podcast. That was a big draw.
All right.
Not the 14 friends I have in the area.
Okay.
Well, tell us a little bit, give us a little bit more context than what I just said. Did you always think that this is the career path that you wanted? Is there connections to the military with your family? Like, I can't imagine, or maybe I'm completely off, that at some point as a small child, you're like, yeah, this is what I'm going to end up doing. So walk us through the path of travel to get to where you are right now.
So I wanted to play soccer in college. Decided that in the 8th grade. Never thought beyond that. That was the goal. Went to TCU, played soccer there, had my first strength coach. Although I'd been lifting weights, use air quotes, lifting weights on my own throughout high school because I knew it was important for athletic development, but I was just doing machines and stuff at the YMCA because I didn't have any instruction. So at TCU, had my first strength coach, turned into a total weight room kid, like better in the weight room than on the field for sure, and figured I have an edge here. I'm more athletic than I am skilled. If I want to get on the field, I can lean into that, and that can help me out. And it did help bridge that gap a little bit. And then my senior year, I was babysitting for a personal trainer, and that gave me the idea, like, her job looks pretty cool. My strength coach's job looks pretty cool. So I went to my strength coach and told him I was thinking about one of these two career fields. And he just straight face said, Casey, you can't be a personal trainer. You're going to kill somebody. So you have to work with athletes and you have to be a strength coach. So then I guess I was like forward and aggressive in my demeanor and how I trained. So, okay. It was like I started interning with him. So worked with the TCU strength and conditioning staff spring semester. And after I graduated, turned that into a GA position at Purdue. Worked at Purdue for a couple years, got my master's there, and then took my first job at University of Arkansas. So stayed there working with Olympic sports, which is everything but baseball and football for us. And just loved it. It was great. And while that was happening, my brother had joined the SEAL teams. He told me they were hiring strength coaches. And I had been sending programs to him and his buddies up until that point. And I'm, as Chelsea can probably tell you, a bit of a control freak. I was like, okay, well, if you need more programming, then I'm just going to go do it myself. So I just started applying for these special operations jobs and got one and been there ever since.
So how long have you been there?
10 years tomorrow.
Awesome.
10 years tomorrow.
Congratulations. And are there a lot of females that are in your role?
We actually just hired one in our schoolhouse, which is great. That's the first time I don't work directly with her, but that's the first time we've had a female strength coach on this coast. We had one on the East Coast in our sister group. She's not there anymore. We're less than 10% for sure, but we're out there.
We have some awesome female coaches here, but sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes it comes up where they'll say, hey, this male client that I have, they're not responding to me and the things that I'm asking of them. And typically my response is, well, I don't, and sometimes what they're alluding to is, hey, would you mind having a conversation? And I'm very reluctant to do that because, one, I think that's the dumbest thing of all time, that I would need to come in and say the exact same thing that this person would say. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'm asking you this because I think it would be really encouraging, because this is geared for coaches, to hear anything that you've experienced and not just where your current job is, but we could probably say this for strength and conditioning as a profession as well. Things that you've had to pay attention to, coach yourself through, to have the type of impact that you want to have. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah.
For sure. I think, based on our previous conversation, it seems like there's a lot of crossover between how things run in my facility and how y'all run things here, in terms of your individualizing, some of the same issues you have, convincing people to do what's best for them, maybe against their bias. So in that case, it's very, very similar. Whereas in the collegiate environment, I can tell you what to do, you can do it, or your head coach is going to make you do it. So that was a little different. Although I didn't have too many issues like working with football, things like that. Definitely had some, but not very many. And I also had players that would lean towards wanting to work with me. And I've talked to head football strength coaches who made sure they had females on their staff for that particular reason. Like, they're going to be able to get them to do things that I'm not going to be able to. Some people are going to lean a little more to them. Some people are going to lean a little bit more to another coach. And the way that we're set up at our human performance program is nobody has to work with me. Nobody has to work with us at all. It's their choice to come in and seek out resources. So that definitely helps. I know through the grapevine that I'm sure there still are some men that just don't want to take advice from me. So if they seek out a coach, they would seek out a male coach. But generally, those personalities don't seek help at all. So at the end of the day, it's maybe not so much about me or my gender. But I would just say, for all the lady coaches out there, just like with some of your female clients, all you can do is plant a seed. They can do it or they cannot do it. You definitely aren't going to get anywhere trying to force them to do it. But there's no reason that they should have to turn to a male coach, although I totally see where she's coming from, because there's plenty of times where I ask operators to take my messaging to other operators. So in that case, it's not a gender thing, but operators are more likely to take advice from peers.
Yeah.
That's why they have established peer counselors in the VA system, because if you have a peer counselor, they're more likely to get the service member to work with a psychologist or a certain doctor or whatever. So that's definitely a technique I've used. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. But also, at the end of the day, some people aren't going to listen to you, the female coach, and they may not listen to him, the male coach. Now, that said, I've also had operators who want to work with me, not a male coach. They don't want to see a male coach. So it can work both ways. So hopefully that makes your female coaches feel a little bit better if they ever run into that scenario.
which I have to think is based on your credibility, right? At the end of the day, like it ends up not mattering how old you are, what your gender is. And I can only imagine that the people that are seeking you out, it's like, well, Casey's really good at her job. That's why I want to work with her. And I hope that's the message that's received. That at the end of the day, like it really is, how good are you at what you're doing? I was thinking, I really didn't prepare a whole lot because I just wanted to have the conversation in real time versus like, canned questions that we robotically went through. But I was thinking that at some point I'd really put the job that you have or a job that's very similar to what you're doing on a pedestal. Man, wouldn't it be cool? And you could say the same for professional athletes, right? I mean, wouldn't it be cool to train these guys that are just, tip of the spear, just, just doing all this cool stuff. And maybe that's exactly what I imagined when I was, 20 years ago, just getting started in this industry. But is there anything that you can deconstruct for us or maybe even demystify? I'm sure there's some parts of the job that are really just like super cool. And where you get to work and, guys that are really taking this serious because their life depends on it and because the people next to them depend on that as well. But I'm sure there's some parts that are just like, and we've talked about this a little bit, just the legality of it or the process or the fact that there's so many different entities that have to be factored in as a part of this really massive system. Talk to Spencer, who's like not 41, but like 21. And it's like, hey, so you're thinking about becoming a tactical strength coach. Here are some things that you may not know.
The bureaucracy is definitely a big thing. We have this incredible budget, and it's hard to execute because it's hard to explain to people who are not in the world of performance, like what a muscle oxygen monitor is and why you need it, what a force plate is and why you need it, why you need this brand of rack or this brand of plate versus another. So that definitely slows us down. A lot of security issues, so we can't use anything cloud-based.
Yeah, we were going to do a Zoom call, and it was like, hey, I got to go through these. I got to go through these different levels of security and all that stuff. And that was the first. I think that's what sparked this question. It's like, oh man, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, they took away our microphones, our cameras, but then gave us external microphones and cameras.
Yeah,
so that makes sense.
Yeah,
they're about to do something different with the phones, things that I don't even understand. But sure, okay, I'll follow along. It's more so the like, please let me have my cloud-based technology so I can look on one computer and get everybody's scores, make life easier because that slows us down quite a bit. It's definitely not like training a sports team. We don't have a platoon come in together, run a program. I don't know who's coming and when. They're all either on different programs, maybe different parts of a program. I tend to put people on training tracks, even though they're on different schedules. I just accommodate within the training track. You need to be at this volume, this intensity, working on these things, biasing these things. It's okay if you miss a day, just keep moving. We're going to hit it again. Don't worry about it. So that has really streamlined and helped answer some of the questions that I had earlier, like how do y'all manage this as well? So
say
that's
that
very different.
Give me a little more context of that. So in other words, like, hey, here are some priorities of training that we want to make sure that we hit, but the way with which you'll navigate even the sequence or like even like a microcycle may look different from one operator to the next. Is that what you mean?
So I use a lot of auto regulation so that they can work it out on their end. The majority of the year, they're not training in person. They're training remotely. Here for a week, gone for 3 weeks, here for a day, gone again. So making sure that they're educated enough, and I write a lot of it into the program in case we can't have these conversations. So there's decision trees built into the program to help them customize. Hit this pace at this RPE for 8 to 14 reps. As long as you're hitting your pace and you're at this RPE, do another rep, do another rep, do another rep till you hit 14. So that'll help differentiate volume. And then they have to be a jack of all trades. So everything's concurrent. all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be a strength biased program. There will be like an even amount of strength, even amount of conditioning program, and then like an endurance biased program.
Mm-hmm.
And fitting people in there where they need, pulling them out to do individual assessments, running assessments, movement assessments, just as needed, because you really have to triage with that many people.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, you know, I show up for the day. I have no idea what's walking through the door ever. So I can have my little to-do list, but good luck.
Mm-hmm.
So having to be really flexible in that regard. And I'm going to meet a new operator probably every day and try to get them set up, get them on a program and establish that relationship.
Wow, that's tough.
It's a lot of traffic.
It's
and
a lot of
flexibility,
traffic.
which was not my strong suit going in. So it's been really helpful for me
Yeah.
to have to learn how to do that.
And what about the rapport? Because I imagine that if you're meeting somebody new every single time, it's like, how do you jumpstart trust?
Mm-hmm.
How do you jumpstart that professional relationship without a whole lot? Because we have the great luxury of, well, there's a lot of differences, but one is that we can stiff arm the sale to really determine if this person is a good candidate for what it is that we want to coach them with. Whereas you don't really have that luxury. Like somebody shows up, it's time to do your job. What are some things that you found to be helpful in that regard, as far as like making this guy feel comfortable as quickly as possible, figuring out what this person needs?
So that is a process that's always being
I
refined.
imagine, yeah.
And I'm really lucky because we have 2 performance psychologists on staff who are also clinical psychologists. So I go to them to help me have better conversations with these operators. So it's like it's a step by step process. When they're walking in the first time, I just ask questions and listen. Maybe make some mental notes. If there's opportunities to teach in there, then great, because that's the end goal is teaching. It's not necessarily even giving a program to somebody. It's teaching them how to pick out their own programs. They're very free to do that, and a lot of them will pull programs off the internet. But trying to give them the education to understand that you need to do some testing beforehand, testing after to see if the program worked. You know, teach them about creating those feedback loops. Make sure that they know what their goals are, because sometimes they don't even have goals or they're very general. Making sure that they're thinking about their job when they're selecting this program or when they're asking us for a program. Because sometimes they'll come in and they'll be like, I need to lift. I want to lift 5 days a week. I'm like, yes, okay, you want to do that. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Why? And how does that relate to your job? And where do those movements overlap with what you're going to have to do for work in the next 6 months? So asking a lot of questions to help them with their process of selecting and executing a program. And sometimes you don't get super far. They don't want to do that testing week. They want the program their buddy's on. Okay, I will absolutely give you that, because then at least I met you. You're on a program. You can message me if you have questions. And at the end of the program, hopefully you come back and we can have a little bit deeper conversation with a little more education to it. But the programming itself has education built in. So they're going to learn something new that will benefit them, even if they choose to train on their own.
Things like you said, like autoregulation, or just the ability to see something and know those things that you mentioned, like reps in reserve, and you know, these parameters around, hey, whatever's written here, there's still some leeway of how I can figure out what it is that I want. Is that what you mean by education?
Yeah, I always use reps in reserve. I don't give percentages, because especially with their schedules, they may have been up till 2 o'clock that night. They may be up till 2 o'clock every night training. The environment might be different. They might be out in a desert. They might be out on an island. They might be up in Alaska somewhere. And their fueling is going to change day to day. How physical the task is during the day is going to change day to day. They have kids, a lot of small kids, so that's definitely going to change a lot of things day to day. So writing a program that adjusts for all that, they're not going to be able to hit a strict percentage, but they will force it to their detriment. And I refuse to put them at any kind of risk in the weight room when you consider how risky the rest of their day and the rest of their job is. So I let them choose their own variation. I'll say, you're going to do a bench variation here, you're going to do a squat variation, you're going to do a deadlift variation. I'll list the variations. I'm going to tell them, do one you're good at, you're proficient at, that doesn't cause pain, that you can get a good amount of load on. If that's 3 different squats, then it's 3 different squats. And you can rotate them weekly. If you want, you can rotate them every 4 weeks. And I just explain this to them if I get enough time with them off the bat. Otherwise, it's also written in the program so that they can make those decisions. And it makes them think a little bit more because most programs are getting off the internet. Everything is locked in place. And that's where might be a great program, but might not work for them.
Yeah. So it sounds like from the get-go, because of the nature of the job, there's no way around creating some autonomy in each one of these guys so that when they leave, how does that work? Will they transfer? Because you said that you'll work with guys that are stationed on the West Coast, but also deployed. So when would their tenure with you stop? When they relocated to, and I'm sorry, I'm not using like the right terms, but when they were reassigned to like a different group? Is that how that works?
So sometimes they will get reassigned to different groups and they'll still reach back and want me to continue training them. And sometimes they've moved on. There have been guys who have been at completely different commands in a different part of the country that have reached back for programming for a couple years, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting good at doing it remotely. I just let them know, like, I can't track you. I can't put that time and energy into you. I always recommend they go to their own performance team first, but if they don't want to do that, I have a relationship with this person. We're going to support them. And I'm sure coaches from other groups are still supporting guys in our group, and that's great. But for the most part, if they stay within my command, then they can be with me as long or as short as they want. They can do some work with me and then switch to another coach if they want, and that's perfectly fine too. The end goal is to kind of push the little birdie out of the nest and teach them to fly because we have new operators checking in every 8 weeks. So we can't, that 80 can quickly turn to 100, can quickly to turn to 120 if we're not teaching some of those older guys how to train themselves, how to program for themselves. So the goal is after a few years, I can give them a template that we've worked out. You see the best results when your volume, your intensity is here, your split looks like this. I'll give you a template. You can choose A, B, C, D, teach them how to rotate it through. That's yours. Run with it. Run with it after retirement if you want.
You got anything to say?
I got a lot.
Yeah, you a little chatty over there.
What I find interesting is, I'm fascinated with the military and what they do and how they train and how their minds work. And up until today, I would have assumed that as long as you're in the military, you had, designated training with your group, especially like special forces where these people work together. Intimate sounds like the wrong word, but, so closely in such severe situations that it'd be like, yeah, go train together. Like I played college football, so I know what it was like to be in the weight room and like bond with these guys. So I find it really surprising that it's so autonomous after, I guess, training, like once they're in. So from a start, it sounds like they have all the facilities they could ever want, and they could just go like pick a small off program off the internet or go to you and then train whenever they want.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So not all units operate like this. There are some units where you are going to go in with your platoon, fire team, whatever, and you are going to do this program.
Or like once a week, there's like, meetup times and there's some mandatory training. But for you guys, none of that's required.
Nope. And it will never happen, even though that would probably be more ideal because the guys do end up even though they're coming through the same pipeline, they'll kind of differentiate themselves. You have your like big endurance guys, your big strength guys, and honestly, they will just switch. Because if something looks hard, if there's a hard competition, they're going to want to do it. And it's harder to run a marathon if you're coming off of 2 rounds of small off, but they'll do it. For better or for worse. That's my job is to be like, maybe not. Maybe we don't do that. But it's very common. So
but to also kind of act like an idiot
specialties-
is like, do you think that would be a good idea to run a marathon and you're 20 pounds
you put
heavier?
On 15 pounds of muscle mass. How do you think that's going to go? And this marathon is in a month? Okay. But I think that's kind of the special piece of special operations is a lot of these groups operate very differently from conventional forces. That's absolutely the model in conventional forces. They're going to go in, and if they even have a coach, or they'll do like once or twice a week group PTs led by a peer. But for us, guys who are in a platoon, smaller group, fire team, their schedules are going to be really different. One's a sniper, one's a breacher, one's a medic. So they're not all going to work and doing the same things. They're going off to different schools. They have different schedules. This one might be off today. This one's on today. That type of thing. So it really wouldn't work for us. And it wouldn't work personality-wise either, because they are really independent, and that's what makes them really good at what they do. And I'm sure, maybe y'all have read some of the books like Lone Survivor and stuff. They can operate soundly and smartly outside of the group, even if they're isolated. But scheduling wise, it wouldn't work. But even if it did culturally, it's been that way for too long.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What is, you've mentioned some, but I want to ask this directly. What would be the biggest surprise to someone like us when we look at the job that you're doing day in and day out? And maybe specifically for this particular avatar, this particular person that we're describing. Not only have I put the job up on a pedestal, but I've put this client, this athlete, this operator on this pedestal that like, oh, well, certainly they don't suffer from the same failure to comply issues that the average day client has, or surely they eat perfectly because they went through buds. And I'm sure there's a ton of misconceptions, but what would I be surprised to hear when we're talking about this guy that you work with?
Well, the reason I reached out to you in the first place is through Chelsea learning that, hey, these Gen Pop clients, and through your podcast, sound a lot like my guys in terms of, where they're starting out, knowledge base, where their biases lie, and the difficulty of coaching them and getting them to comply. They have done amazing things physically with no help from anyone. So they do really hold on to control of that. It can, I think, cause a lot of anxiety to hand that off to somebody because they've been successful doing this in the past. They are, smarter than your average person. So they like learning. They listen to a lot of podcasts. They read a lot. They want to find the answer for themselves. And so a lot of times they'll do their research and then they'll come in and ask you the question and they think you're going to reaffirm their answer. And 9 times out of 10, I do not, because they just don't know where and how to do the research that's specific to them, or they don't know how to apply their context to what they heard on this podcast. This podcast wasn't for operators. That doesn't apply to you. That diet doesn't apply to you. You need to eat breakfast. You need to eat carbohydrates. You need to do these things. But they know they can survive anything. So not eating all day isn't a big deal. Not eating all day and then doing a hard workout or a hard evolution. They know they can do that. It's already been proven that they can. So that part's a little bit frustrating because they're not even thinking about optimizing. They do not see themselves as professional operators or as professional athletes. And they're not treated that way because we don't have a mess hall. The government will not build one for us, even though we keep trying to say their nutrition needs are different and we need to supply the food for them. So they have to meal prep and bring their own food to a lot of places. Or they may have to stay in a hotel and then go to Walmart and buy food. And our dietitian has to teach them how to cook in a microwave. Or we send like slow cookers and blenders and things with them so that they can cook wherever they are, supplement the local cuisine so that they can get enough calories. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. They are smart, they have learned a lot, but they don't have the nuance to apply it to themselves and their context. And then on the back side of that, they know that they can perform because they're so gritty and they're so mentally tough that they don't need optimization to perform. So I wonder sometimes if they're just testing themselves. Like, you could have had lunch, you could have, but maybe they just want to see how it goes without it. 'Cause it will help them stay hard and stay gritty. And I can't argue against that unless we're training for something specific. Like if we're training for selection, it's like we need to optimize right now, and then you can have like a gritty, tough week when you get there. But to get your run times down, to get your calisthenics up, we need to optimize sleep. We need to optimize fueling. We don't need to practice starving yourself. I know you can handle day of, but also they're not going to starve you. They're going to feed you because they want to know what you can do.
Yeah, in case the listeners can't hear, the question was which qualification, which category of soldier essentially is the most badass, was the question.
And Casey said, well, the least badass is the officer.
Big sorry to my brother if he listens to this.
Sorry, bro.
Who's the quarterback? Who's the running back? Who's the
The captains are the quarterback,
Yeah.
for sure. But they're all the same because the sniper is the medic. The medic is the breacher. They may not be on that op, but they all have the same training. They've all gone through the driving schools where they're like rolling vehicles and stuff like that. They've all done it. I would say your tier 1 unit because they get really specialized in insanely cool sounding training that I'm sure I can't repeat here. But
we
your
don't
tier
have
1
the clearance
units,
for it.
Yeah. Your tier 1 units, it's like they're out there doing movie stuff for training. So they're getting that additional level, and their mission set is different and a little more focused, so they can really specialize more. But their missions could be all over the world. Whereas other groups, your missions are going to be here, here, or here. So you'll kinda
like
learn how to do that.
Oklahoma. Yeah, they don't get out very much. That's all well and good, and
Actually, you know what I will say? There is a medic. I think he got shot 3 times in the leg. In him being the medic of the group, he put on his own tourniquet. He did all his own medical care. He's barely conscious, and he had to take care of himself. And he did it. So all the other guys in his platoon, their minds are just blown, like watching him be able to execute at that level in that scenario.
That's crazy.
Jeez.
What I was going to say is like the other side of that is I was talking about this earlier with another one of our coaches, and here it's like, hey, you have an identity, and that's separate from your role. That means that you can fail in your role, but it doesn't mean that you're a piece of shit as a person. And because this isn't life or death, and because the stakes aren't so high, and because, to be quite honest, most people here aren't going to throw themselves into these aspects of health, I think that's a palatable conversation. But as I hear you talk about this person who knows that they are the embodiment of resiliency, I'm sure that's really hard to be able to separate and say, this is my job, this is who I am. And you said it earlier, that makes it really hard to know when proving your toughness isn't always the answer. Does that make sense? And does that ever come up? Like with training, is something as simple as that. Like, hey, maybe we don't have to train like 12 times a week, like you don't have to prove anything. And I'm sure you can't say that. You can't say like, hey, you don't have to prove how tough you are. But it's absolutely, I'm sure, what you want to say sometimes. Like, hey, there's volume and being a tough guy, and then like, hey, you made it, dude. Like you're in the top tier group. Like you can chill out, and it doesn't mean you're being a pussy. It means like you're trying to be smart. I imagine that's really hard to retrain these guys that have made it this far by embodying that. And so to challenge that isn't challenging their role as an operator, it's challenging who they are as a human being. True or not true?
It's very true. And I don't know that it's that different for us. Like if we weren't strength coaches anymore, that would be difficult, making that pivot. For me, at least, it would be really difficult.
We'll just be Harry Potter, like, aficionados. Yeah.
Full-time nerds.
Yeah, we got to back up.
But for the guys, it's the first thing that our psychs are going to talk to about the guys is what's your why and how does that relate to your identity? Because part of the reason we have a performance team is because there's a high rate of suicide when guys get out of special operations. And there's a lot that goes into that biopsychosocial model There's TBIs, there's hormone issues, there could be like moral injuries, PTS. They usually don't get PTSD when you're a special operator, but PTS. But also that loss of identity and that loss of community. Because when you get out, the guys that are still in are very busy. And they're still going to work with their friends all day. It would be like if all of your friends are in the same grade as you, or if all of your friends are a grade below you, and then you graduate first. They're going to still hang out. They're not going to be reaching out to you as much as maybe you would like them to.
It's how we show up to prom
after
after we've graduated from high school. Yeah.
I feel like there's a story there, and I'll ask you all that afterwards. But yeah, it's huge. So we're constantly trying to remind them, and some of their leadership will also chime in and remind them, this is a job. It's not an office job. It's not a 9 to 5, but this is your job. This isn't your identity. You are a friend. You are a husband. You are a father. We encourage them to have hobbies, especially so part of my role is running our selection prep program for guys who are interested in trying to go to a tier 1 unit. So there is a carrot to dangle that a lot of guys try out for, and they're only going to choose a very, very small amount of people. So essentially those other guys get kicked back, and trying to encourage them, like, this isn't a failure because you tried. Like, you entered the arena. You are still part of the team here. You are still a special operator. And regardless if you're here or there, it's got to end eventually. Eventually you're going to get out. You're going to retire, and you need to know who you are outside of these people and outside of this job.
And is that a message that's being received, do you think?
I'm hearing it more from operators telling each other that. So I do think it's getting spread a little bit more throughout the culture, and I do think the way that deployments have changed for us, war has changed, the way that war is going to change. What my brother did in the teams is not what guys are doing now. So they're coming in thinking, in high school when they decide they want to do this, they thought they were going to be in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's not the case right now. So they have to pivot, and that in itself can be hard because they went through this beat down and all of this hard work because they wanted this to be their identity and they wanted to do that specific job, and then they have to pivot. So really trying to remind them that mental flexibility is the key to happiness, and you can start practicing that now, and disassociating your identity from your work.
Man, that's fascinating. And it's encouraging that in this thing that I'm sure a bunch of little boys will be like, well, why would I ever want to dissociate from that? But to get out in front of that before, like you said, it's too late, or before it's really hard before it's taken from you without any premeditation on how that's going to look once you get out of the military. Yeah, very interesting.
And also guys can get seriously injured, and to the point where they can still live a good life, but maybe they can't run anymore, so then they're not going to be able to do the job. And, we're working with those guys. We're helping them with the rehab and reconditioning, but that's like a forced early retirement. The same thing in sports. Like, if you can't come back from an injury, you didn't expect that part of your life to be over so soon, and all your buddies are still there, and you're kind of out on your own. So also trying to teach guys, which maybe it's a little easier because I'm a female, maybe not, but like, I have a network of friends from college. I have a network of friends from childhood, and I know to reach out to them constantly, and they're constantly reaching out to me, and we have these group texts and stuff. So trying to teach these guys, like, you're going to be responsible for this. You're going to have to be the one that reaches back, that plans visits and things like that, because you're going to be the one on a different schedule. Because right now it's so built in for them because they're going to work with their best buddies every day. I call it a fraternity with guns because that's essentially what it is. Real world's not going to be like that. Even if they all get out at the same time, they're going to move to different parts of the country and take on new jobs, and kids will be growing into new stages of life. And it can be easy to get isolated if you didn't build those habits. So just trying to make them aware, you're going to have to work at friendship now, and here's how you can do that.
It sounds like you love what you do.
I do.
What's your favorite part?
I think it's the inability to ever solve the problem.
What a great way to say that.
I stole that from my boss. I can't take credit.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. you're never going to fully solve the problem because new people are coming in with the same mindset. There's a lot of cultural things we want to shift, like the identity piece, and like the training piece and the health piece. Try to get the guys to think long term, not short term. And then, the longer I'm in it, the smarter I get, the more problems you pick up on things that just could be optimized to ensure that they're going to have a healthier life once they're not operational anymore.
So you've been in the strength and conditioning game for some time. What are some things that you once thought were true that now, not necessarily you think are wrong, but maybe at this point, to your point that you just said, like having a much broader set of optics that you just don't think is as important? Or maybe you once really, really cared about. Now it's like, Or maybe it's the opposite. What do you got?
I'll give you two answers, one for me, one for the guys. So for me, the Dunning and Krueger effect has been huge because as a young coach, I thought ABC, this is what you do. This is how it's done. And then the longer that I'm in the field, the dumber I think I am. And I know that that's just going to continue. The more that I've learned that I don't know. So no matter how much knowledge I pick up, no matter how much I'm able to improve my approach to coaching and relationships, the science is going to continue without me, and I'm always going to be trying to catch up, and I'm never going to get there. Technology is going to advance. We're going to learn new things about the human body that are completely opposite of what we thought, which is already happening with like blood lactate, things like that. So just being aware, like you're always going to feel dumb, and that's okay. That's a sign that you're a mature coach. And it's okay to let the guys know that I don't have the answer for this. I'll try to find it if there is one, but it's complex. There may not be an answer. I'm kind of at the end of my abilities here. Let's work on this together, or I'll call somebody else and see if they have an answer. I guess before I thought that I would know everything. Eventually, I would just get to a point where I would have all the answers, but the answers keep running away from you because they keep changing in a science field. And then for the guys, I always loved Olympic lifting and saw values in versions of it. But the training model that we have, while I think cleans are great for everyone, like knowing how to clean helps me stack bumper plates over 6 feet, which I have to do a lot because we're constantly like buying more equipment and shipping it out. But they're not local long enough for me to take them through a progression. And that means they wouldn't get any load for the first 15, 20 minutes of their lift, and they may only have an hour. So when they come in, it's, can you clean proficiently? Do you want to? You don't have to. Or if they want to and they're not good at it and they're not willing to dedicate the time with lightweight to learn the skills, et cetera, I just remind them like, hey, you think NFL players are like cleaning and snatching all the time? Yeah. You think NHL players, you think all of these athletes are? Yeah, they're not. They're not. You don't have to either. It's okay. I'm going to put some dumbbells in your hands, and I'm going to tell you to jump as high as you can. And we're going to go outside, and we're going to sprint really hard for 10 to 20 yards. And we're going to get a very similar training effect, and you don't have to learn how to do that. We can start doing that today. So just socializing that there's no one right way to do it. Not everybody has to back squat if that's going to cause a problem, but we can get load on you right now in other ways. Maybe you get back to back squatting, maybe you don't. Regardless, we can get you ready for your job with a program that looks completely different from the programming of the guy next to you.
That's really good. What jumped out at you?
Well, I'm still kind of hung up on the identity thought from earlier. But
we dropped you off at that part.
Yeah, I was just my trying to chase down my thoughts, but we might get back to that. We might not. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Like, really, what's the intent of a clean? It's to be really explosive through the hips. And as you're thinking about military, what might be important? Well, maybe like stacking sandbags. If you got those around, you could have them pick up a heavy bag and try and throw it over something, and you're essentially doing clean and jerks, and it's probably safer than having to develop all the flexibility and technique of a front rack and a push jerk and all that stuff. So, I mean, that absolutely makes sense. I mean, you could put dumbbells in their hands and do a quarter squat and jump as high as you can.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities just around things that we've said. It's like, hey, there's there's some principles at play, but who cares about this particular movement?
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of different ways to travel. What I hear you say, Casey, is that the better you get, to realize that you're not very smart and the problems are really, really hard to solve, maybe impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have that to look forward to as you get deeper into your career. How does your training look? Is it,
Well,
I mean,
it kind of sucks right now.
oh, does it?
So I've been dealing with very strange injury that's related to my vision, which took me years and years to figure out.
That's one of the reasons you came and
Yeah,
seeing,
one of the reasons I'm here.
yeah.
I did have an
Yeah.
appointment with a PT and an optometrist here
Mhm.
because we didn't have them in California. So, I mean, I apply the same principles to me. What can I load without pain? And I just do it on repeat. And some days it's fun, and some days it's really boring, and I don't want to do it, but I have to do something or else I'll lose my mind, and I don't want to get weaker. It's really boring. It's lunges, goblet squats, push-ups, pull-ups, sled, and assault bike, and that's pretty much it. On
Now,
repeat.
Notwithstanding the acute issues that you're working through, have you found that a little less novelty has just naturally happened because there's a few like staple pieces that you just know work for you and are good, or is the lack of variety because those are the few things that don't cause pain?
It's because they don't cause pain. I won't pay
Gotcha.
for it for the rest of the day. It won't interrupt the next workout. But as I'm gaining more range of motion back, you start trying new things. Like now I can do a rear foot elevated split squat, and I couldn't do that for years. I couldn't assault bike regularly for a long time. Now I can.
Man, you never think that you would miss an assault bike, but it sounds
Right.
like that's possible.
No, I like to run, and
Yeah.
I have not been able to run.
Yeah.
So assault bike, echo bike is my new best friend.
Have either one of you ever got to a point where you think a rear foot elevated split squat is easy?
You can always make it harder.
You can always make it harder. But even the basic variations, like I'm doing this for 10 years, and I don't think it's ever gotten any easier. Or where I finish and I go, well, that was cool.
I've mastered this. I never have to do it again.
Well, that was no problem. Tell us what you see in your future. Do you feel like this is where you're called to be? Are there other things that you're excited to pursue? I mean, you have a pretty cool career track where you've gotten to have the collegiate experience. You've gotten to have this tactical experience. Man, what else are you excited for professionally as far as strength conditioning is concerned?
So I'm a big believer, and I am stealing this from a book that Chelsea had me read, and I wish I could give credit to the book, but I can't think of it right now.
We'll just say it's you. You don't. Yeah, this is
just from me.
the original thoughts
I'm really,
of Casey.
I said I was dumb earlier.
Yeah.
I'm actually really
Yeah.
smart. I was just trying to throw it all off.
Psych.
It said, it was a Christian book. We were doing a Bible study with it, and it was about finding what breaks your heart and leaning into that as your calling, which is what took me to the tactical field in the first place. Because originally, I wanted to mentor college-age women, and men too, but it was mostly women that I went into the collegiate field for. And I loved it, and I was doing it, and I am still in contact with a lot of those athletes, which is super rewarding. But once my brother was in the teams, and I learned that he wanted strength and conditioning help, and they didn't have a lot of help there. It's like nobody is more deserving of this help than this group of guys, because there is no reason they should be getting hurt in the weight room when they have to go get shot at later that day. So that really broke my heart, and continues to, because it's the unsolvable problem. You're trying to change a culture. New people are coming in all the time with the same mindset, and it's a big group of people. So I don't think that'll ever change. I can't see I don't see a future where I'm not involved with a tactical organization. And it would be really hard for me to leave this group of guys. I've tried to move someplace cheaper, but I couldn't get there, even though it would still be with special operations. But now I just want to extend that, because I feel like I'm at a place where I've figured some really helpful things out, especially being one of the first coaches in the field. We got to solve the problems first. But there's a lot of organizations that don't have any help, that are just as in need and just as deserving. Police, agents, FBI agents, they don't have help.
Yeah.
So
Nobody cares about those
nobody
guys.
cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. The funding's not there, even though we're proving that the model is helpful. So that's why I started my own company, Warfighter Health and Performance, because I want to start extending those services to those other organizations. And they can't afford a full-time performance team in their facility. That's fine. I've gotten really good at providing this help remotely. And so have our psychs, so have our dietitians. So, I hired one of our psychs, one of our dietitians,
Cool.
and we're just offering our services now to any tactical organization that wants help, and we'll find a price tier that is in your budget and start trying to teach you the same things and providing the same resources.
Super cool. And even what you were saying earlier about what you've been forced to do because guys are on deployment, because they're not mandated to do the training, is there's some education enveloped in there. And there's some autonomy that you're creating versus like we've seen from time to time, like people becoming dependent on the program. And I can only imagine that that's a part of what you're doing with this.
Yeah, it's the same concept. I can write a program, even if all you can afford is one program, or if that's all the time I can give to that project. Within that program, all of your men and women will see benefit because the program will get customized to them as they're working through those decision trees. And then they can ask me further questions and so on and so forth. So we offer, as little customization to the maximal amount of customization. We can come in person if you can afford it. You can do performance journaling, and the psych can be on the other side of that performance journal, helping you, guide you, even if they're not in the shoot house with you observing your performance. That's why apps are great. We use a training app, we have a nutrition app, we have a mental performance app. We'll do it all, but also trying to get these organizations to understand that you need all three, because everybody starts with strength and conditioning. They see human performance as strength and conditioning. But if your nutrition's not good, your sleep's not good, your mental health isn't good, it doesn't matter how good the program is. So trying to make sure that at the lowest price tiers, we're offering all three still.
Yeah, that's amazing. What is the way that people could find that? I'm sure that we'll link it in the show notes, but it's Warfighter.
It's Warfighter Health and Performance, so you can find us at warfighterhp.com.
Cool. On the social medias, you got a MySpace page?
I have the world's worst Instagram because I hate doing it and I can't afford to pay somebody.
Screw it. We don't need Instagram. We just need a good, robust website with psychs and nutritionists. That's all we need.
Go. Yeah, so
it's on there
at Warfighter HP.
Yeah.
Don't get too excited.
Yeah.
There's not much on there.
Yeah, we're too busy.
Too busy coaching.
We're
honestly,
too busy training top tier operators. We don't have time for stupid ass social media. This is awesome. I feel like we could corner her. I feel like it's been an interrogation because I wanted to get all this information. But thank you for being here. This has been awesome.
Thank you for having me.
And when are you coming back to town?
3 months turns out.
All right.
All right.
Let's book the next one.
Nice.